Good afternoon, everybody, or good evening, or good morning, kind of our standard sign-on now whenever you see this. So the assignment for today, and actually all this week, is really geared towards the aperture setting in your camera. Now, if we harken all the way back to like September, we can remember that in class, all of our daily questions were really largely based around these type of things. When would you adjust your aperture setting to one side or the other, right? And under what shooting circumstances would you be using a low aperture or a high aperture value? Okay. The main focus for this is to understand how to adjust your aperture to shoot wide open so that we can get what's called a maximum blur or a very narrow depth of field. Okay. Now on this, when we talk about aperture, what is aperture? Aperture is the relative opening of the lens, right? So if we're looking at this lens, right, you can see right through it. Okay, that is shooting wide open, is what we would describe that as. Okay, but as we stop down, as we close down this opening and we let less light in, which I'm doing a very, very poor job of doing. When we let less light in, that's a higher numeric aperture value. So we go from f like 1.2 all the way up to f16, f22, f32 in some cases. Now the difference what happens there is that your background becomes more or less blurred, right? So if we're shooting at f1.8 and my subject is relatively close to the front of the lens, we're going to see a very blurry background, and that's the goal. That's the practice for this lesson. So if you have a camera that's shooting manual controls, you need to shoot at an aperture of as close to 1 as you have available to you. Some of the kit lenses or the zoom lenses will be about 3.5, 3.5, or 4. That won't give you a great depth of field blur, but if you get in real close to your subject, you could probably achieve that. The three big tips that I have for achieving a really quality depth of field blur is: number one, shoot all the way wide open. So shoot at 1.8 or as close to 1 as you can get. Number two, get as close to your subject as possible. Okay, so close that distance, shoot at a minimum focus distance, and that should give you, again, a very narrow depth of field. Number three is to leave space between your subject and the background. Okay, so what I mean there is that your subject should be close to you and the background should be off in the distance, okay? That'll allow all the details of the background to be able to fade faster and quicker. There's two big terms that we introduced today in class. One is called fall off. Fall off is the point at which your focus diminishes. Okay, so if we're looking at my keyboard here on a kind of a lateral thing here, and this was the key that was in focus. Okay, the first time we see a key that's out of focus, that's going to be your fall off point. So if enter was the focal point, and L is where things become blurry, that means that my fall off occurs rather quickly. If fall off starts here, that's a rather long fall off. Okay, that's kind of a crappy example, but I think you get the point. The other term is bokeh, which is actually, we're recycling this from earlier in first term, but bokeh is defined as that pleasing out of focus area within the details of an image. Okay. Now the place that you'll see this very frequently is, especially at Christmas time when we have all those lights everywhere downtown and whatever. When you have a pleasing bokeh, that means that those lights aren't really defined. They're just these orbs, these little golden orbs, okay? So fall off and bokeh, kind of two new terms. The reason we're doing 36 images for this assignment is because that's what a roll of film was back in the day. And if you were to submit a contact sheet or something like that, for credit, it would be 36 images. So we're just kind of throwing it back here a little bit for these next couple days. If you can get 36 successful images demonstrating good depth of field, I feel like you should pretty well understand how depth of field works. Okay. If you have any questions, please let me know. Right. If you're it's kind of difficult to do this assignment on your phone, so you will need access to a camera. So you can come in on Fridays or after school between 2 and 3 and knock this out within like a half hour to grab a camera, shoot wide open, and get those images there, okay? So the images I'm looking for are noticeably blurred in the background, a defined subject, right? So if it's your mom or whatever, or your cat or whatever, that's fine. Just so long as I can visibly see that there's that fall off and that bokeh in the background, okay? If you have any questions, please let me know. Yeah, and I will see you later.